So I'm only going to cover 5 basic types of knives. There's obviously more, but these are the 5 that you're going to come across in your daily use in the kitchen. So we have a chef's knife, utility knife, fillet knife, paring knife, and a slicer. So let's jump in and take a look at those and see what we're working with. So let's start talking about chef's knives. They are the most popular knife to use in the kitchen. They're incredibly versatile and very easy to use. Chef's knives are usually defined by a long and wide blade. There's 2 types of chef's knives. So there's the traditional French knife that we're all used to seeing and associating with a chef's knife, but there's also the Santoku. So let's compare those two. So we have a traditional French chef's knives here. So you can see very long blade and it's very wide. What defines a French chef's knife is the curved blade at the bottom. So you start off really wide and then it tapers off towards the end. What does that mean? So that means when you're working on cutting something, the blade is actually going to rock back and forth with you. That is why these knives are constructed like this. Let me move these guys out of the way and I can actually show you what happens. So the curve of this blade is really what's going to allow you to have that traditional rocking motion. And that's really what's going to help us kind of get that speed going when we are cutting. As you can see, chef's knives come in different sizes. Again, that is going back to whatever is most comfortable for you to use. If you're a larger person, smaller person, can lift more, can't lift all that much. It also comes down to the size of food that you're cutting, is how you're going to select your tool. If you need a longer knife to cut something that's larger, or a smaller knife to cut something that's smaller. Basics, but sometimes people forget about it. Meanwhile, a Santoku, which originates in Japan, is one that has a blade that is even all the way across. As you can see, there's also these little ridges along the blade, and those are going to help with creating air pockets when you cut something. So whereas a French knife, the cutting motion is like this, and it's more of a rocking motion, your Santoku is going to be completely vertical. And these air pockets, these ridges here are going to help prevent food to stick, so you're able to cut completely vertically. The choice between the two, whether you use a Santoku or a French knife, really comes down to, again, your personal choice on how you like to cut things, on how you like to, work your way through your prep. So next we're going to talk about a utility knife. Utility knife is somewhere between a chef's knife and a paring knife in terms of size. It's usually used for lighter cutting jobs, just basic slicing, nothing that's going to take a very long time to cut. So these would be considered utility knives, and in comparison to a chef's knife, this is kind of where it is. And then on the other spectrum of knives, this would be your paring knife. So it is a bit longer, a bit thinner, and used for basic slicing. So thirdly, we're going to talk about fillet knives. Fillet knives are generally used for fish, and they are a knife that has a very long, thin blade. And what we're really looking for fillet knives really comes down to the type of blade that it has. Fillet knives generally need to have a very flexible blade. That's really all the difference that comes. That's really all it comes down to. The difference between fillet knives is how flexible is the blade. So usually the way you test it is try to see how much give it has when you go and press down on the point here. As you can see, there is absolutely no bend in this knife here, so this one's considered very rigid. Whereas if you take this one right here, as you can see, it has a lot of give to it. Why is that important? So if you have a more flexible blade, it's actually going to be able to work with whatever that you're filleting and actually help get more meat off the bones and not leave that protein on there. Moving on from fillet knives to a slicer knife. They look pretty similar. What is really the difference? There's two types of slicer knives. So there is a smooth blade that I have right here, and then there is also a serrated blade, which I'm not sure if you can see. What's the difference is that slicer knife with a smooth edge is generally going to be used to cut things like poultry, your chickens, and used generally as a carvery knife. The serrated blade one is going to be used for your breads, your pastries. The serrated edge is what's going to help crush your food. Slicer knives generally have a very long blade. Tip to remember with a slicer knife is use the whole blade. A lot of people, when they use a slicer knife, want to use that same kind of chef's knife approach, and we really don't want that. Using the whole length of the blade is going to do a few things. So first, it will result in a smoother cut because you're working your way across, and then it will also take you less time to do it because you're using those long cuts to cut through. You're able to really work through your item. All right. So lastly, we're going to talk about these little guys. I think from this angle, it's really hard to tell that these guys are little guys. So the paring knife. I absolutely adore a paring knife just because it's so easy to maneuver. It really becomes like an extra digit on your hand. It's good for trimming vegetables and fruit, and after having taken a look at all the other knives, you can really understand that you want to make sure to use the right tool for the right job. After having taken a look at all the different knives and all the different shapes and sizes that you can work with, like we never want to use like a large chef's knife to cut an itty bitty strawberry, or we don't want to take a paring knife and start attacking a full watermelon. You kind of get the picture. That's how you kind of end up cutting yourself, losing a finger. In my next few videos in the knife skill series, I'm going to talk about all the different ways, shapes, and sizes you can cut something into, using the various knives that I just talked about. I will also have a separate video talking about how to properly hold a knife, just making sure that you will prevent strain on your hands and assist you with doing your job better and faster. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully this was helpful, not a little too creepy with me kind of being laid out with all of my knives here. I really do believe that knowing about the tools that you're using is really going to help you in the long run to figure out how to cook things and make you feel a lot more comfortable in the kitchen. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will try to cover them in a future video.